And I was always looking, every employee that I ever hired in my whole career, I was always looking for potential, who wants to be me, right? Who wants to do, because as you've said often, not everybody is built for the advisor's job.
Hi, I'm Chris Reynolds, and for my entire career, it's been my mission to help independent financial advisors build a better business through a remarkable client experience. In this podcast, you're going to hear from the visionaries, from the leaders, from the independent advisors who are reshaping the future of the financial advice industry. At the end of each episode, I'm going to leave you with at least one winnable idea that you can start implementing right away. Let's turn the page on building a better business. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Turning the Page. I'm your host, Chris Reynolds, and today we have a very special guest. We have Diane Groves, who I have known for, I was trying to count, well over 20 years, that's for sure.
Oh, yeah.
Well over 20 years. And Diane has had a great career, and I thought she would be a fantastic guest because she's done it all. She was at another dealer, got acquired by IPC, built a fantastic practice over a long period of time, and then went through the other side, which is then brought in a successor and eventually retired. So she's got the whole gamut of what we should be doing in this business. So welcome, Diane.
Thank you, Chris. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you. So let's start with your story. How did you get into the business? Why did you get into the wealth management business? And what was it like back then when you started?
Well, it was definitely back then. To put it into perspective, I guess we have to, have a snapshot of what it was like back then.
Right.
I mean, there were very few people that had a computer.
Right.
Most information, school projects were done from actual sets of encyclopedias where the data was, way old, and most parents couldn't even afford them. So financial literacy was, it wasn't even a thing. I don't even know if it was a word.
Right.
Back then.
Right. Yeah.
There was a thing called an RSP, but unless you were extremely affluent, you didn't even know what it was. And to get the information to find out what it was not like Google, hey Siri,
Right.
What's on an RSP?
Yeah.
So in order to put it into perspective, you have to understand that, it was a totally different era back then.
Absolutely.
So, there was the field of certified financial planner they had them, but nobody knew what that was or what the job description was back in the day.
Right.
So that's basically the environment that we were in.
Crazy.
It was, when you think about it.
When you think about where we are now versus that,
Yeah.
and it wasn't that long ago, as much as we say that, it was.
I know, it makes me feel like a dinosaur. But anyway, myself, where I was in my life, I was married and had 3 school-age children. Public school age children. And I was running and working in a wood shop. I have an industrial woodworking license, which is very shocking.
See, I've learned, and I've known you for 20 years. It's the first time I knew that.
Well, my husband was a contractor and we built houses, and it looked like a good spin-off business to do kitchen cupboards and vanities.
Right.
And so I went back to school and took a course, and we opened up a wood shop, and then the crash in the late 80s happened.
Right.
And housing market stalled out. And so I was doing that part-time and working for Canada Post sorting mail.
Oh, geez, you did everything.
Yeah. First thing in the morning, I would go in for 7 and work till 11 every day. And that's where I was. So to get to the point, my husband had a friend whose wife was in this industry with Primerica.
Okay.
And I don't know if you're, maybe the younger generation isn't very familiar, but, Primerica, a multi-level marketing company, was all about, getting people underneath you in the industry so that you could make more money off of them.
Right.
That was the concept. Anyway, she wanted to know if she could come and do a presentation. So, of course, I'm always open to ideas. So I said, sure, I'm, have enough self-control. I'm not going to get talked into anything. And so she came over to the house and she did this presentation. And I didn't sleep that night at all. I was restless. And I remember saying to her, I cannot believe that people don't know this stuff. And it was simple stuff. Rule of 72, term insurance, whole life insurance. I mean, it was basic stuff.
Right. Not like today. Yeah.
Not like today. And I always thought that I was of average intelligence. And if I didn't know this, lots of other people didn't know this. And so over the next couple of days, I perked on it and I thought, oh my, it wasn't really that I wanted the job. It was more crusade. Like, oh my God, people got to know this. People got to know this. So I jumped in. Even though I had 2 other jobs, I jumped in. And at that point in time, I don't have any idea what it's like now. Primerica did an excellent job in a very short period of time, getting you your IFIC license and your life license.
Getting in, yeah. Good.
Get in. I mean, they had it down to a science. So within a 4-month period, I had both licenses. And believe it or I know.
That's incredible in today's standard. Yeah.
In today's standard. Right. So I jumped right in and she said, okay, you can go out and, get clients, make money and sell insurance. And I was like, okay, like, how do I go about it was really scary. And anyway, I did. I went out and I started, of course, with my warm market, family and friends, and started. My parents were one of my first clients.
There's clients, I think all of us were. Yeah.
Exactly. And they were also an excellent referral source because we had a resort business, and they were retiring at the time. And so I took the money from their sale, put it in the Mackenzie Industrial Growth Fund, and made them 40% the first year.
So you were a hero.
So I was a saint, and that's how it started. But very quickly, I was at a client's house one night. It was I'll never forget it as long as I live. I was at this house one night, pitching my spiel, and this guy who was in the know asked me a question. He said, so if I put money in these RSP things, what happens when I die? Can that money go to my children? And I said, oh yeah, sure can. No problem. And he said, tax-free? And I said, yep, I think so. And so I left that night, and I called this Trish, the girl who got me into it right away. And I told her, I said, this guy asked me this question, and this is what I told him. And she said, oh no, that's not right.
Uh-oh.
And I said, oh. So again, I didn't sleep that night because I was like, okay, if I'm going to do this, I need to get more education than they're willing to give me.
Right.
Because I'm dangerous.
Right. A little bit of knowledge can be dangerous, as they say.
Exactly. So that was a light bulb moment for me, because when I went back to the next Primerica meeting and told them this story and said, I'm not educated enough to do this.
Right.
I'm uncomfortable. And they were like, oh, no, you don't need no more education. You're good.
Never mind. Yeah.
Now you know the answer to that question. Just go on out there and do some more. Not my personality, not how I roll.
No.
And so I instantly decided that maybe this wasn't the dealership for me. By then I had been, at least 6-7 months in, and I realized that, educating the client really wasn't their mandate.
Right.
And that's what I was passionate about.
Right. The educational part. Yeah.
The education part was driving me. So I started looking for another dealer. And I realized at this time that this was what I wanted to do. I gave up the post office job. The wood shop had, fell off just because of economic situation. And I decided that I was going to start my own business, and this is what I was going to do. And it was terrifying.
As it always is, yeah.
Absolutely terrifying. And I went to my dad. My parents were both entrepreneurs. My dad left a 25-year management job with Kraft to open up the resort. And I was raised in the tourism industry, thank God. Anyway, I went to my dad and I said, Dad, I'm so scared. I just, like, this is big, like really, really big. I'm not going to have a paycheck. Like, and he said, Diane, he said, you're an entrepreneur. You're a driven person. You always have been a driven person. And he said, the only thing you have to rely on is yourself.
See, easy
peasy. He said, you know, you want to make more money, you work harder. Right. He said, you know, like nobody can steer you. You're going to steer yourself. So you're going to be fine. And so after my little powwow with him, that was it. I was all in. I really lucked out. I found a wonderful dealership.
Yeah.
And I was only early 30s, I'm going to say, by this length of time. And I ran into Brian from Multi-Mutual.
Yep.
And myself and two others from Primerica that I had befriended.
Right.
We jumped ship and we went to Multi-Mutual. So I walked into my first Multi-Mutual meeting, and there were 47 reps at that time.
Right. Yeah.
I was the only girl.
That was my my next question was how many other female advisors were there at that time?
Not one.
Not one.
Not one. And I was so intimidated because not only were they all male, but they were all, you know, mid 40s. Like they were experienced. They were wearing like 3-piece suits. They knew what they were talking about. And I was really super intimidated. But one of the saving graces, and, you know, Brian and Bev Hurlburt will always hold a place in my heart, was because they had 2 sons and no daughters. And so Brian and his wife just kind of took me underhand. And I always ask questions, even if they're stupid. I don't even know they're stupid, but that's my personality. I'm always going to ask the question. So I became this little sponge. And all the other 46 advisors, which shocks me now when I think about it, were not intimidated by me a bit because I was younger, I was female, and I'm not sure if it was the testosterone or what it was, but they didn't mind sharing with me.
Oh, good.
No matter, and it totally unlike I find it now. Now I find the industry, you know, they don't want to share. They don't want to tell you those little trade secrets. And
that more competitiveness, as opposed to community-wise. True.
Exactly. God help you if you help somebody else. You might make another buck more than you, right? So anyway, they weren't like that. And so every time we had a meeting, I was taking notes and I was listening. And then at lunch breaks, I'd be going, get up beside one of the guys and say, so tell me about this. And they had no issue at all. Like they shared absolutely all their experience, everything they knew. And that was the best thing ever. Because I had that. At the same time, I was taking my CFP. I had decided that I needed that CFP. The only place that we could get it at, there's no online, obviously.
Not in those days.
Not in that day. So the only place I could go was up to Brampton, Sheridan College.
Okay. Yeah, Sheridan College.
So went to Sheridan College Wednesday nights and took a class, drove all the way up there for 4 hours, come all the way back home. I mean, it was a big event. and going to Toronto back then, you know.
Oh, wow. Yeah, the big city.
But I did it and made it through my CFP. in good time. And the more confidence I got, the more people I saw, the more referrals I got. 100% built my practice on referrals.
Right. Doing a good job.
Yeah. And my business model was just tell them the truth.
Right.
Just educate them. Let them know they can do this and this will happen. They can do this will happen. And then let them make the choice, but just give them all the education they need to make the right choice. And
one of the things I was going to say, one of the things, and it was one of my follow-up questions that I know that you've prided yourself on, is focusing on that client experience.
Yeah.
Just as you're describing, right?
Yep.
Making that great client experience. If you make a great client experience, you get referrals. So maybe, dwell on some of the things that you did around that client experience and some of the reactions that you had.
Well, again, I was raised in the service industry.
Right. So that came second nature.
Second nature to me. My dad and mom, neither one of them even had a high school education, and built a phenomenal tourism resort business.
Right.
And that's how they did it, was all in customer service. So it was ingrained in us, from a very young age, how to deal with people, how to deal with people when they're upset.
Right.
And the best example I can give you of that was when I was in the resort business, and I was at the front counter, and 100% of our clients almost come from the US. They check in on Saturday. This particular Saturday, it poured rain all day. It poured rain all day on Sunday. Poured rain all day on Monday.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Think about it.
Great vacation.
Yeah, great vacation. And families. And so, this customer comes in the office and comes to me at the front desk, and he's a guy and he's just losing it, right? Because it's raining, he can't get out fishing, his wife can't soak up any sun, the kids are in the cabin, which is very small, he's not happy. Right. And I'm not going to say exactly what I said, but I was not very patient with the person.
Unpatient. Yeah.
I was 16 years old and had been out partying the night before. I was not very patient. So anyway, after the client left, my dad called me in the office. And then again, a light bulb moment. He said, "Diane, you can't talk to the clients like that." I said, "Dad, he's bitching at me. It's raining, for God's sakes. What am I supposed to do? Like, I can't make it stop raining." I can't control that. Yeah. And he said, "Diane, his problem is not that it's raining." I just looked at him. And he said, his problem is he worked 50 weeks a year to come down here for 2 weeks, and his vacation is the shits. Right. His wife is nagging at him. His kids are underfoot, which is making his wife miserable. The guy's life is miserable right now. And that's his problem. And I said, "Well, again, what am I going to do about that?"
All right. Yeah.
He said, "Okay, here's what I'm going to get you to do." He said, "I'm going to put non-stop play movies on the TV in the cottage." We had a video system where we could plug movies VHS movies into the cottage. He said, "We're going to put free non-stop movies on everybody's TV in the whole camp." Yeah. I said, "Okay, I can do that." And he said, "I want you to go into the rec hall, and I want you to put all the pinball games on free play."
Free.
So the kids can leave the house.
Right.
They can come down to the rec center. They can either watch TV or play pinball machines. Now his wife can sit and read a book in quiet. Right. He's not going to get nagged at. Kids are out of the house. You solved this problem the best you could.
Right. Right.
So that's the mentality I was raised in.
Right. So, and you brought that to your business.
I brought it to the business. When a client had a problem, the market went down.
Right.
His problem is not that the market went down. His problem is he's afraid because he got a kid going to college in a year.
Right. Or he's going to retire, or he's going to whatever.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So all you need to do is shift it away from what you think the problem is. It isn't even the problem. And then emotionally address their fear.
Right. Yep. And if you can do that and you do it consistently, that's what building a business is.
Right.
Absolutely.
And then all the other things that you should be doing anyway, like sending them a birthday card,
Sure.
take diligent notes. I always had a CRM tool right from the beginning.
Right.
I always took diligent notes, the dogs' names, when they're going on a trip. When I come home, I wrote a whole big thing so that before you went the next time, you could read it.
Right.
And then ask them, how was that trip? Right? You want every client to think that they're the only one you have.
Right. That's a great quote. You want every client to think that's the only one they have.
That's right.
It makes perfect sense, but so many people forget that.
Right. And the other thing for good client experience is you never use volume as an excuse to be sloppy. So
yes, I've heard that one before, actually. From you.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Yeah. So, telling somebody in the resort industry that, something got screwed up in their room or their cabin because it was a busy week and all the cabins were full that week.
Right.
It's not an excuse.
No.
To forget to do the trade for the client because you had 5 trades to do and the phone wouldn't stop ringing. Not an excuse. No. Never use volume as an excuse.
I love that.
You want every client to think their trade is the most
important thing
you're doing that day.
Yeah.
Right. So that was how I was raised. So anyway,
that is great advice that people should take.
Yeah, well, that's how I did it. And yes, I bought some books of business over my career. It's tough. Much harder to go on the bought book than it is on the self-grown book. But that's how I did it, and that's how I expanded it. And I never deviated from where I found my joy.
Right. Your principles.
Yeah.
What you had. So now take me to, now you've built this great business over a long period of time. And now it's time to, look at succession. And it's a big topic right now. And I know you were one of the early adopters of, the whole succession plan. But as I said, it's a huge thing right now in our industry. It's a conversation I have almost daily.
Right.
So,
tough.
You came up to that point. Now it's time to let go. It's time to find somebody else to hand the reins over. Talk a little bit about that experiences and some of the things that people should look out for, I guess.
Yeah, succession planning was paramount to me. It was always there. And it sounds funny. I mean, you're growing it and trying to dump it at the same time. But again, because my parents were business owners, there was a lot of lessons that, I learned from them. So succession planning was big. And I was always looking, every employee that I ever hired in my whole career.
Wow.
I was always looking for potential, who wants to be me, right? Who wants to do, because as you've said often, not everybody is built for the advisor's job. I mean,
no, not at all. I would say we're the 1% for a reason. It's a hard job, right? It's hard.
Job. It looks great.
From the outside.
Something like a teacher's job right now. Yeah, that looked good before, not so good now.
Right, exactly.
So, being an advisor takes a certain amount of skill set. And so every hiree was a potential to me. And later on, IPC started the Colby hiring process testing.
Right.
Love it. I'm a big advocate of it. I used it from the time I took my first one at a conference somewhere. I don't know where it was. I always used the Colby system because I think that you can't hide those tendencies. They're there. They're part of you. And in an interview, you can fluff it off, but you can't hide that.
But you can't fake it once you do the test. And we use it extensively. So yeah, absolutely.
It's just super smart as far as I'm concerned. So anyway, skip the 8 potential successing guys I had.
Yeah.
8. Yeah. When I found Dan, I knew instantly that Dan had something special. He was already in the industry. I stole him.
Right.
Which,
the best thing to do, steal people. Absolutely.
Which, going forward, that would be a good tip. Try to grow your own, just steal somebody's teenager.
Yep,
That's the answer. And so I stole him. And right from the time I met him, I told him right up front, I said, this is what I'm looking for. I was probably mid-50s then. And I said, I'm frustrated because I really, really want to pick the person that looks after my clients.
Right. Absolutely.
It's very important to me. It's been my goal since I started the business. I want to pick the person. I want to warm them up to them. I want a soft handoff. I had a detailed vision of what I wanted. And so he come on board. He started out at reception and he didn't come in as a junior advisor. Right. Because I am also a very firm believer that in order to run a business and, be the leader of a team, you have to know what everybody's job is. And you have to know the stresses and the pressure of everybody's job. So I wanted him to prepare paperwork. I wanted him to process. I wanted him to know so that you can sympathize with that person when you see 15 files on their desk and it's, 4:15. So he started out there, which also gave him phone conversations with the client. He greeted all the clients. Every time I introduced him to the client, I introduced them. Here's Dan. Dan is going to be my future. He's starting out here, right from the get-go. Build it steady. Never lie to them, because then as soon as the client comes in, they go to the reception area and they meet Dan, you tell them he's going to be your successor. Right. You get into the office, and what do you think the first question is going to be?
Yeah.
When are you retiring?
Why are we talking about this?
Why are we talking about this? Right. So they're going to bring up the conversation. You don't have to bring it up again. They're going to bring it up. And again, you don't lie to them. Right. Yes, I'm going to retire. And I'm not exactly sure what day I'm going to retire, but it's very important that we have Dan here and that we start to get used to Dan, because I might not have a choice.
Right. That's another consideration.
And I would say to them, I might get sick. I might get breast cancer and have to be out for a while. I might get run over by a Mack truck.
Anything.
I would have that conversation with them and I would say, this is for your protection. If I don't do this, someday you're going to pick up the phone, you're going to call this office, and you're going to be sitting in front of a total stranger.
Right.
How's that going to feel?
Right.
So that's how I pitched it. And I never quit. I never quit.
Constant. So how long from the time that you introduced Dan till the time the handoff actually took place, approximately? And this is for the benefit, because I get this question quite a bit.
I'm going to say it was 2 years.
Yep.
And at that point, at the 2-year point, that's when we started talking to John about temperance. Right. But all through that 2-year period, Dan and I were having conversations. Right. Open conversations about, all the way through. Okay. So, because up until temperance, it was, you're going to have to make payments on this business and you're going to have to live.
Right. And actually live, right?
You're going to have to actually live. And you're at a point in your life where you're going to be buying a house and maybe starting a family while this transaction is being paid for.
Right.
So this is important. This is important. How are we going to hand this off like this? It was the number one concern we had. We were never concerned about the client's retention, the transition to the client, because we had that part rock solid.
Right.
We knew we had it rock solid. Every little detail we paid attention to. He signed the Christmas cards. I signed the birth. Like we knew that this was coming. And so we knew we had that. It was all about the money. It was, how am I going to, I can't give it to him.
Right. No, that's not fair to you. The equity that you've built up. Yeah.
Exactly. I don't want to mortgage it over 10 years. And meanwhile, the price of these businesses was just blowing up. I mean, they were getting more and more valuable all the time. Yeah. And so the financing was our number one concern. Right. All the time. I wasn't worried about Dan. Dan was ethically me. He was mini me.
Right.
Unfortunately,
Yeah.
unfortunately, he wasn't female.
Right.
And that was really the only concern we had, because my clients were used to the emotional female touch.
Right.
So anyway, along come 2015, I guess, when we were in Newfoundland.
Yep.
In Newfoundland in 2015, I got wind through knowing a lot of people. I got wind something was coming.
Right.
And so anyway, then in 2019, Temperance launched, and I made the first call to John.
Yeah.
Dan and I had talked about it. We didn't really know how it worked. And we were constantly doing pros and cons. Pros and cons of this, pros and cons of that.
Which way, which direction, why? Yeah.
Because I mean, I love Dan. He's like a son to me. I don't want to set him up to fail.
Right. You want the best for him. Absolutely. And the best for your clients. Yeah.
And the best for everybody. So in our conversation, once John came down and we started talking about temperance, in every meeting Dan sat in, every meeting, whether we were talking about the cost, didn't matter. I wanted him there. We made this decision together.
Right.
Because there's no point in one of us wanting it and the other one not.
And the other one doesn't. Right. Absolutely. Right. So a lot of communication. Tons
of communication. And by then our relationship was strong enough that he was telling me how he felt, not just what he thought.
Right.
Right. And that's really important. You know, his girlfriend was in on it. You know, we talked a lot openly about what this was going to mean to them. And so in 2019, we bit the bullet. He was very excited about it. I mean, the pros for him was he got a salary.
Yeah, and a good one.
He didn't have to worry. Yeah, he didn't have to worry. He didn't have to worry about where he was getting paid. Wasn't like me. Should I buy printer cartridges or paper, or you know what I mean? All of that pressure was gone, and you know, got a good pension, got good benefits, and still got to do what he loved. Yeah. And for me, I got my money.
Right. You got your money, got to retire.
It's that simple. I got my money. I got it quicker than I would have. I got, in my case, more than I had anticipated. But then when you're building it, you don't really realize the value.
Right. Yeah, what you're building, yeah.
Right. And so for us, it was win-win. And, you know, we had that conversation. Dan and I had heartfelt conversations about, I said, well, Dan, here's the alternative. You can just say to hell with IPC.
Right.
And go work for a bank.
Right.
I said, they'll take you in a heartbeat. You got a CFP, you got all your insurance,
you're all qualified.
Licenses,
absolutely.
You're all qualified. You probably even yank some of my clients with you. But I said, you're going to be dictated to.
Right.
It's a big corporation. You're going to be told what to sell, when to sell it, how to sell it, and how much to sell. Right. So I said, I think you're going to have more freedom if you stay with IPC. I said, you're a CFP, so you have a fiduciary duty to the client.
Right.
I
said, the right thing.
Yeah, you can do the right thing. So I think this is a better deal, but you have to decide. So we decided together. And so we signed the documents in 2019 with a 2-year period.
Right.
And as everyone knows, COVID came in.
Right. Right during that time.
10 months later. But by that time, Dan had moved from the front desk. In 2019, we signed the paperwork. Dan started sitting in on every meeting.
Right.
So we hired another receptionist. Dan come in every meeting. Dan read my notes from the meeting before. Dan brought me the paperwork. We decided together what we were doing for the client. He prepared the paperwork, and in front of the client, when the meeting actually happened, he did all of that work. So this is where you were last time you were here. This is where you are now. This is what we'd like to change. This is why we want to change it. And I sat and listened with the client. Right. Very hard to do. Very, very hard.
That's the hard part. Yeah. Not to take control of that meeting.
Yeah. Very hard. I struggled with it, but I mastered it. And, but he took part of that meeting. And then after, when we talked about the fluffy stuff, then I participated and he participated, and you know, we had next steps processing, and away we went. So for that from 2019 until COVID hit. He was sitting there on every meeting.
Right.
Then COVID hit.
Yeah.
Then COVID hit. Oh man, what a shit show that was. Trying to figure out, how, like every business, not just ours, like every business, just trying to figure out how to do this and meet everybody's needs at the same time and not risk anybody's health was extremely excruciating. But we made it through. And I honestly believe it helped us. It helped me.
I think it did. I think it really strengthened our business and our ability to use other mediums to communicate with our clients. Absolutely.
Yeah. And in my case, it helped because I could get them to Zoom with Dan without me.
Right.
Right. So he still kept booking reviews and things, but unless they were specific and said, can Diane be there? I let him roll with it.
Right. And just let him do it.
Let him roll with it. Let him roll with it.
The best thing you can do.
Yeah. And then he would send me a quick email, went great, or can you call them about this? If it was something that the way we set it up was if he had any indication at all that the client was the slightest bit uncomfortable,
right,
then he was to let me know so that I could call them. Right. And
then, you could always follow up if necessary.
If necessary, but you really want, and it's kind of like cutting the cord. Like for some clients, we cut the cord and then they would still say, can you have Diane call me?
Yeah, right? Just let her call.
Yeah, I just needed to, whatever. And the deeper the relationship, the harder that is for that client, right? And some of my clients, were 30-year clients.
I was going to say friends, yeah.
Yeah, 3 generations, we work 3 generations quite often. So by the time the cutoff date come, which was, when was that? 21?
Yep.
Yeah, 21, June of 21. By the time the cutoff come, they had 100% moved.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Yeah, it was absolutely perfect.
Right.
I hadn't, retention was great from what I know, because as soon as it come, I don't have access to my programs anymore, so I can't see who's gone.
Right.
But from what I understood, it was perfect, and retention was amazing. Dan is fulfilled. The clients are happy. I'm happy. Everybody's happy. I don't know what I would change.
No. And that's why I wanted you on the show, because it's, your transition was literally picture perfect. It worked well. We actually call that program Pinnacle now, but still, that whole process that you went through. And so, to wind it up, I always do a rant and sort of summary of what we talked about, you touched on so many things that I go through in this show, which is you're passionate about, what do you love? You love teaching people. You love to help them. You've had these great, meaningful relationships, whether it was good or bad. When someone challenged you, that's where that turn came in your career. And as I said, you really planned it out. So my takeaway or my rant for everyone who is listening, all of my listeners, is, think about succession. I think that you said it best. Succession starts when you open your business, because that is what all entrepreneurs should be looking at is, what is the final destination? So with that, any final words for our audience? Find
what it is that you love to do. You'll know it when you get it. And sometimes it finds you.
Yeah, I think that's the best advice. Absolutely.
Yep. That's all I can say. You'll know when you're doing the right thing, because you'll just come home every day happy.
I love it. So with that, thank you, Diane, for being on Turning the Page. I'm your host, Chris Reynolds. And for those listeners, in the comment area, I would love to see, what do you love? What do you love? What are you passionate about? And I think that's the theme that's coming out of this, is if you do what you love, you never work a day in your life. With that, thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next episodes. So if you've liked what you've heard today, do us a favor and hit subscribe. That way you'll find another episode and another actionable takeaway on how to keep building a better business.